Okay, let's talk about SnapperGPS. SnapperGPS is a low-cost satellite receiver for wildlife tracking that Amanda, Alex, and I developed here at the University of Oxford, and which uses our own version of the so-called snapshot technique. We deployed a couple of them last summer for the first time to track some loggerhead sea turtles. And in this talk, Amanda and I want to share some lessons that we learned, describe some potentials of our approach, especially for sea turtle tracking, and also want to describe how other researchers can use our system for their own projects. But at first, let's talk about the method from a more general perspective. You often use global navigation satellite systems for wildlife tracking, and you abbreviate this as GNSS. The best known GNSS is probably the GPS. You've all heard about that one. However, a problem with all these systems is that their signals do not travel underwater. And this makes tracking marine animals like sea turtles challenging, since they only surface for brief intervals, sometimes as short as 1 second. In contrast, these traditional GNSS receivers need to regularly be at the surface for at least 30 consecutive seconds to decode satellite orbit data from the satellite signals. You can reduce this time with assisted GNSS, where you preload this data on your receiver. But typically, this still requires several seconds to decode signal transmission timestamps from the satellite signals. And finally, there is snapshot GNSS, and there you do not decode any satellite data. Therefore, you only need to receive a few milliseconds of the signals to resolve a position fix. However, the few existing commercial snapshot GNSS systems for wildlife tracking are expensive. Furthermore, they are not always as accurate or reliable as traditional GNSS receivers. And that's why we developed SnapperGPS. SnapperGPS is this small snapshot GNSS receiver here. We basically built it to show how improved signal processing in the cloud can enable wildlife tracking with very simple and affordable hardware. The core idea is that we offload all computations from the device to the cloud. And this cloud offloading has two main advantages. At first, it allows us to use powerful signal processing algorithms in the cloud. Tailored, robust algorithms that use probabilistic models and multiple satellite systems. So we can calculate position fixes from very short signals with a very low resolution. And this leads us to the second advantage. Since we only need these short, low resolution signals, we can use simple, low cost and low energy hardware for the receiver. For example, the cost of the electronic components is under $30. And SnapperGPS can also run several years on just these two little coin cells. To achieve this, obviously, we need to compromise the signal quality, but our cloud-based algorithms can still achieve median tracking accuracies of around 10 meters in the real world. And these algorithms, we made them open source, by the way. Okay, so here's how it works. You first configure the receiver via an app or website that we developed. Then we deployed them on nesting sea turtles. During the next 2 weeks, we detect whenever the turtle surfaces, and we capture a very short snapshot of the satellite signals. Just 12 milliseconds at a very, very low resolution. In contrast to traditional GNSS receivers, we do not process this data right now. We just store the raw data on the device. And then we collect the tag after 2 weeks when the turtle returns to the beach. Finally, we upload the data to the cloud. And there we employ our novel signal processing algorithms to calculate the track of the turtle. And these algorithms allow us to reliably get positions from the very rough and very little data that we collected. If you want to read more about these algorithms, you can have a look at this journal paper here, but I think here we want to talk a bit more about our deployment. Right, Amanda?
I think it's about time to start talking about our actual sea turtle deployment. Last summer, we deployed SnapperGPS on nesting loggerhead sea turtles on the island of Maio, Cape Verde. Cape Verde is one of the largest nesting sites for loggerheads, but this is actually the first time anyone has tracked nesting females on Maio, so we were excited to see how this population would behave. In total, we tagged 20 nesting sea turtles with SnapperGPS. Additionally, we tagged another 20 turtles with horizon tags from Arribada that many of you might already be familiar with. Horizon is an assisted GPS tag, so we were interested in seeing the difference in results due to the difference in technologies. For this deployment, we were interested in the behavior of nesting females during the internesting interval, so we deployed the tags at the beach during nesting and then recovered them 2 weeks later when the turtles returned for another clutch. There will be an ecology paper soon about the tracking results and their implications from a biological standpoint, but we will give you a brief sneak peek of the tracks here. I'm going to use this opportunity to show off the SnapperGPS web app. So here we are on the Snapper web app homepage. I'm going to go to the download page and enter one of the upload IDs from one of our turtle tracks. And here is the result of the cloud processing. So each marker is one location fix, and the size of the circle is our confidence in the location. If you just want to take a quick screen grab of the track instead of downloading it, you can also change the map to a different color scheme. We have some darker ones, some lighter ones, whatever you prefer. You can also toggle the track that connects the position fixes, like you can see in a second here. There we go. And if you're happy with the processing results, you can also download the location and timestamp data in your favorite format down here. We've got JSON, KML, CSV, whatever you're used to. And here's a quick overview of the turtle tracks that we recorded with the SnapperGPS and Horizon tags. As you can see, there was quite some diversity. A lot of turtles just swam slightly offshore and then stayed there for 2 weeks, but we also had some turtles that went on quite the journey. The orange one actually went around the island twice. So here's a little preview, but like I said, there will be an in-depth ecology paper about these results. Due to an issue with the surfacing detection mechanism, some tracks were not captured or incomplete, so you can see, for example, that the pink track just stops in the ocean. This was very unfortunate, but this problem had nothing to do with the actual snapshot GNSS technique, it's just the saltwater trigger that stopped working. Our successful tracks demonstrate that the snapshot positioning worked really well and reliably produced a position fix whenever the receiver collected data at the surface. Like I said before, we deployed SnapperGPS alongside Arribada Horizon tags. The big difference between the two is that SnapperGPS uses a snapshot technique without cloud offloaded processing, whereas Horizon is an assisted GPS tag that calculates positions on board. Horizon does that by preloading satellite data. Now, because SnapperGPS doesn't do any processing on the device, it has relatively simple hardware, and as a result, it's a little cheaper to manufacture. The snapshot technique only needs milliseconds of the signal, whereas assisted GPS still takes a few seconds. This also means that the radio is on for less time on a snapshot device. The shorter on time plus the lack of any onboard processing makes a snapshot device like SnapperGPS much less power hungry, and as a result, it can run on much smaller batteries. So overall, the snapshot GPS approach has lots of advantages, in particular for marine wildlife tracking. However, an assisted GPS board like the Horizon has the advantage that it calculates the positions on the tag. This makes it much easier to upload them with a network like Argos, which can make remote tracking possible with some extra hardware. That is much harder with a snapshot approach and currently not possible with SnapperGPS. I want to take a second here to thank Arribada, without whom this deployment would not have been possible, in particular Alasdair Davies, thank you. Without Arribada, SnapperGPS would not have made it on sea turtles, and we hope that working collaboratively we can continue to advance conservation tech like this. So going forward, the big obstacle for using SnapperGPS for marine tracking is surfacing detection. But before that, we are working on making the general purpose SnapperGPS hardware open source and available to other researchers in the next 2 months. Many of you listening might already be familiar with AudioMoth, which is an open source acoustic data logger. AudioMoth is sold via GroupGets and LabMaker. Those are platforms that aggregate orders to do group purchases with a bulk discount. This is a great solution for small markets like conservation, where it might not be feasible to have full-time employees in warehouses. But the main hurdle for SnapperGPS recently has actually been the worldwide chip shortage. But it looks like we're back on the track to do a release pretty soon. So if you are keen to get your hands on a Snapper, keep an eye out on our Twitter in the next few months. And maybe you can be one of the first ones on our GroupGets campaign. In the long term, we hope to add more functionality to GPS. Here at the bottom, you can see some iterations we've been testing recently to make SnapperGPS more suited for wildlife tracking in particular. So if you want to tell us what you would like to see in your wildlife tracker, do get in touch. We always are interested in feedback from people who have actual field experience. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time. Jonas and I are PhD students at the University of Oxford and supervised by Alex Rogers. Alasdair Davies is co-founder of the Arribada Initiative, and Juan Patino-Martinez works for the Foundation of Biodiversity on Maio, aka FMB, in Cape Verde. You can follow us on Twitter and check out our website if you want to read more about SnapperGPS. Please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions and miss the Q&A at the end of the session. Thank you very much.